Good morning, students. So this is your second video of the chapter Be Wordsworth, written by the author V.S. Naipaul. In our previous video, we had discussed the summary of the chapter and 3 themes. And today we are going to discuss the 4th theme, that is escapism. We will also discuss the setting and the narrative methodology, and we will start the reading of the chapter. So by the end of the video, you will be able to understand the theme of escapism, the setting of the story, and its narrative methodology. You will know the meanings of the difficult words in context of the chapter. Explain the text in your own words. So now open your workbook on echoes and we will read the theme of escapism. So children, let us discuss the meanings. Diversion means redirection. Futility means uselessness. Embrace means hug. Disillusion means disappointed. Attributes means characteristics. Deter means discouraged from doing something. Aids means helps. Complement, which completes something. Aspirations means ambition to achieve something. Succeeds means triumph or wins. Stagnant is still. Shatter means break or smash. Escapism. Escapism is one of the themes of the story reflected through the protagonist B. Wordsworth. Escapism is defined as the habitual diversion of the mind to purely imaginative activity or entertainment as an escape that allows people to forget about the real problems of life. Our protagonist, B. Wordsworth, doesn't earn any money. He is unable to sell his poems, and to escape this reality, he tells the boy that he was writing the greatest poem of the world, which he would complete in next 22 years. This is only an escape from the reality that he wasn't able to sell even a single poem till that day. In an attempt to deal with the futility of inner city life in post-colonial Trinidad, B. Wordsworth embraces escapism by excessively praising his own poetry. Like he says that he is going to write the greatest poem, and even the poem that he had written on the mothers was the greatest poem written on mothers ever. He was disillusioned and lived in a dreamlike world. The reality did not please him. He admired the attributes of great romantic poet William Wordsworth, but never went ahead with writing his greatest poem. So see, he has taken the attribute of William Wordsworth. He says that they both shared same heart. Why? Because William Wordsworth is a famous nature poet, and B. Wordsworth also tells the boy that he could cry on seeing beauty of the nature, beauty of a simple flower. He knew that in reality, nobody had ever bought a single copy of his poetry. But that did not deter him from claiming the poem he had wished to sell to the narrator as the greatest poem about mothers. Throughout the story, the poet, a Calypsonian, built an imaginative world for himself, where he would consider himself equal to William Wordsworth. He even tried to make the young boy a part of his escapist world by telling him of the greatest poem in the world, which he was supposedly writing at the pace of 1 line per month. Now see children, he says that he is writing the greatest poem, and he thus makes the boy also part of his escapism. He has expressed this thing to the boy only, right? But we all know that he was not a successful poet. But he is not ready to accept this reality. He is trying to escape. Moreover, B. Wordsworth kept telling the young boy that he had the eyes of a poet. He constantly trained the child artist, but did nothing to cultivate the artist in himself. He has not achieved anything in reality, as his dreams are all in his head. In the world of happiness he has created to deal with his reality. The element of escapism is very strong throughout this story, as B. Wordsworth aids in the narrator's escape from the realities of his mother's abuse. I hope you remember that in summary also I had told you that once when the boy went to B. Wordsworth's house, ate mangoes there and was late, he reached home late, he was abused, or you can say scolded, by his mother. The boy was upset, he started crying and ran back to B. Wordsworth's house. B. Wordsworth took him out for a walk, and thus he developed the same escapism in the boy also. The boy also escaped the reality of his mother's abuse by enjoying the nature outside. B. Wordsworth's action did not complement his dreams and aspirations. He wished to write a poem that would speak to all humanity one day, but he never succeeds. Obviously, if you are writing one single poem for 22 years, obviously the person is not a successful poet. Because if you have read about Shakespeare, we have read that he had written a lot of literature in his life. It was more than what a man could write, the literature a man could write in his lifetime. And see, that is why Shakespeare is so famous. But this man, B. Wordsworth, is thinking of writing the greatest poem of the world, but he would take 22 more years. He has already spent 5 years in writing it and would take 22 more years. Right? So this is not the reality. If you want to be a real poet, you have to write poetry quick. You have to be very quick in expression of your thoughts. In his attempt to embrace fully a sense of escapism, he tries to hide his failures from both himself and the narrator. See, he is bragging he is going to write the greatest poem of the world which will sing to all humanity one day. And even the poem that was in his pocket that he wanted to sell to the boy, that also he claims to be the greatest poem ever written on mothers. But if it was such a great poem, why hasn't anybody ever bought it? What becomes evident in story, however, is that B. Wordsworth is conscious of his stagnant nature. Stagnant means he is not moving ahead. He has stopped himself at one place. And he shatters the boy's illusion of a romantic world with his confession that he had made on his deathbed, that everything about him was imaginary. And with this, he allows the boy the opportunity to discover reality and to become what he, B. Wordsworth, never was, a part of the real world. So by the end of his life, he had realized how he throughout his life had run away from the reality of life. He was an imaginary poet. All the thoughts of being a great poet were in his head, and none of them was ever fruitful. So he didn't want to spoil the life of the boy, and thus told him that he shouldn't be a poet. He shouldn't be a poet like him. He should be a real person in this real world. Children, there is another theme that I want to discuss which is not given in your book. It is the theme of language. The colonial experience made people feel they were living in between two worlds. They were hybrid people. They not only had a zealous wish to keep their culture and tradition alive, but they also explored to satisfy their craving for the modern world. Even in the previous video, I had told you that the people of Trinidad had undergone rule of Britishers, and Britishers had left their literature and their language, that is English, there. So the people had mixed their native language with English. They did not want to leave the roots of their traditions, but they also wanted to adopt modernity, which could only be adopted if they adopted the language, that is English. The colonized subjects means the people of Trinidad learned how to speak the settlers' language. So settlers here are Britishers. And bit by bit, they find themselves mixing their native language with that of the colonizers. This is obvious in the language spoken by the mother and the son. They do not speak refined English. My mother said when I got home, where you was. Otherwise we know it should be where were you. You think you is a man now and could go all over the place? And even when the boy says, but why you thus keeping on going round then? So the way the boy and the mother speak English, it is quite obvious that it is not their native language. They have mixed their native dialect with the language of the Britishers. And the writer V.S. Naipaul hints at the same thing throughout his chapter also. We are going to read setting. But before that, let us discuss the meanings. Post-colonial means occurring or existing after the end of colonial rule. Here we are talking about the rule of the Britishers. Depression. Here it refers to the period of financial setback in the country. Hardships means severe suffering. Protagonist means the leading character of the story or the play, or you can say the main character. Fosters means encourage the development of. Instances means examples. Relish means enjoy. So now let us discuss the setting. The story is set in post-colonial Trinidad. Now, post-colonial means after the rule of the colonizers, that is, the Britishers, was over. Port of Spain during the Great Depression. Port of Spain, children, it is capital of Trinidad. The Great Depression, as I had told you earlier also what it is. It is a period of economic crisis in the country. The Great Depression of 1930s brought adverse times in Trinidad. It was because of the anti-colonial sentiments, unemployment and poverty. After this, people became materialistic. They wanted to earn as much as they could and had no time for family or nature. A time of economic hardships. The author is making a point that people care more about themselves rather than they do about nature that surrounds them. The protagonist, B. Wordsworth, lives in a small hut in Alberto Street, whereas the young boy lives in the Meagle Street. The story is not set on a particular day or time, but stretches over to a long period which fosters the boy's friendship with B. Wordsworth. Different instances of the story take place at different places. It starts with the strange man coming to boy's home to watch peace. A week later, the story shifts to B. Wordsworth's small hut, where the boy relishes the mangoes. There are also different real places mentioned that forms the part of the story. B. Wordsworth and the boy often walk down to streets like St. Clair Avenue or visit places such as botanical gardens, rock gardens, etc. So now I hope you have understood the setting of the story. The first is the house of the narrator. The second place that we go to is the protagonist's house at Alberto Street, right? And the narrator lives at Meagle Street, right? And then when the boy was scolded by his mother, they went out for a walk, right? So we go to that place, and then they went to several other real places also mentioned in the story, like the botanical gardens, etc. And by the end of the story, we again reach back to the protagonist's house, B. Wordsworth's house, where he is lying on his deathbed, And years later, when the narrator comes back and wanted to meet B. Wordsworth, he again comes to Alberto Street and finds that his home was gone forever. Now next we are going to discuss the narrative methodology of this chapter. But before that, note down the meanings of some difficult words. Recognized means identified. Perspective means a point of view. Curiosity means strong desire to know something. Engages means occupies. Assume means to suppose. Rely means depend on with full trust. Now let us read the narrative methodology of this chapter. Before we start reading it, let me tell you what narrative methodology is. Narrative means the way you speak, right? The way you narrate a story. And methodology means a way out, right? The way your story is narrated. So, narrative methodology is a storytelling technique that provides deeper meaning to the reader and helps him use his imagination to visualize the situations given in the story. The author uses first person, second person or third person for narrating the story. And this story, B. Wordsworth, is narrated in the first person. So, the author has used I or we while narrating the story. Now let us read from your workbook. The story is told to the readers from the point of view of one character, that is the young boy. This is referred to as first person narrative, where the character speaks about him or herself and shares the events that he or she is experiencing or has experienced. I have already told you in the summary that this story is one of the experiences of the author himself and he is narrating it. He has told this from the perspective of a young boy. First person can be recognized by the use of I or we. Naipaul's B. Wordsworth is told from the perspective of a young boy whom B. Wordsworth called Sony. It is through the boy's narrative voice that we get to know our protagonist and his life. It is the boy who, out of curiosity, engages in conversation with him and soon becomes his friend. We had discussed this yesterday also, children, that the story is told from the perspective of a young boy who meets a stranger, a man he had never seen before, right? And the name of the man was B. Wordsworth. First person narrative limits our knowledge of the characters. As readers, we may learn about what other characters think and feel, but we are still limited in our knowledge because we must rely on what the character shares. When B. Wordsworth narrates the story of a boy poet and a girl poet, it is the boy who tells the readers that B. Wordsworth seemed to grow older. The boy understood his story, and so as readers, we assume that it was B. Wordsworth's personal account. Now children, take out your textbook. Today we have to read the first 2 pages of this chapter. So children, take out page number 116 of your textbooks, chapter number 10, B. Wordsworth by V.S. Naipaul. 3 beggars called punctually every day at the hospitable, which means friendly and welcoming to visitors or guests, houses in Meagle Street. At about 10, an Indian came in his dhoti and white jacket, and we poured a tin of rice into the sack he carried on his back. At 12, an old woman smoking a pipe came and she got a cent. At 2, a blind man led by a boy called for his penny. Penny is a small sum of money. Sometimes we had a rogue. Rogue means dishonest man. One day a man called and said he was hungry. We gave him a meal. He asked for a cigarette and wouldn't go until we had lit it for him. The man never came back. So they used to meet beggars and also some strangers like this man. The strangest caller came one afternoon at about 4 o'clock. I had come back from school and was in my home clothes. The man said to me, "Sony, may I come inside your yard?" He was a small man and he was tidily dressed. Tidily means orderly, or you can say neatly also. He wore a hat, a white shirt and black trousers. I asked, "What do you want?" He said, "I want to watch your bees." We had 4 small gru palm trees, West Indian palm tree, and they were full of uninvited, means arriving somewhere without having been asked, bees. I ran up the steps and shouted, "Ma, it have a man outside here. He say he want to watch the bees." English was not a native language of Trinidad. Britishers who ruled it gave this language to people there. So the boy and his mother are poor at English. My mother came out, looked at the man and asked in an unfriendly way, "What do you want?" The man said, "I want to watch your bees." So now, here we have read the description of the different beggars who came to the narrator's house every day to collect money. And then why the boy speaks grammatically incorrect English, because it is the language of their colonizers and he has mixed English with his own native language. So why is boy's mother so unfriendly with the protagonist? Boy's mother is unfriendly with the protagonist because she was used to meeting such strange men every day, and the strange men could be rogues also. So obviously he had to be little strict and rude. His English was so good it didn't sound natural, and I could see my mother was worried is anxious. She said to me, "Stay here and watch him while he watched the bees." The man said, "Thank you, madam. You have done a good deed." Deed is action. Today, he spoke very slowly, very correctly, as though word was costing him money. We watched the bees. So we here refers to the protagonist, B. Wordsworth, and this young boy. This man and I for about an hour, squatting near the palm trees. Here squatting means sit with one's knees bent and one's heels close to or touching one's thighs. The man said, "I like watching bees. Sony, do you like watching bees?" I said, "I ain't have the time." He shook his head sadly. He said, "That's what I do. I just watch. I can watch ants for days. Have you ever watched ants? And scorpions and centipedes and congeries." So now what are congeries? Congeries means conger eels, long scaleless eels found in warm waters of West Indies. Have you watched those? Now what do these words spoken by the protagonist B. Wordsworth tell? It tells that he is so much in love with the nature. He can watch the bees, he can watch some insects and some reptiles for long just to notice the beauty of the nature, how beautifully nature had created everything. And then in the beginning we have read that his English was so good that the boy was impressed by the way he spoke, right? Because he was copying the colonizers. Colonizers means British. He had properly copied the British. He had taken their way of speaking, and even his dress was just like as Britishers dress up, right? And this was the reason of the anxiety of the narrator's mother. So here we have read about 2 themes. First, the narrator's way of speaking and the way he was dressed up shows the lost identity, and the way he loves to watch different insects and animals and trees and plants shows his love for nature. I shook my head. I means the narrator, the young boy. "What you does do, mister?" He got up and said, I am a poet. I said, a good poet? He said, the greatest in the world. What your name, mister? B. Wordsworth. B for Bill? Black Wordsworth. White Wordsworth was my brother. We share one heart. Now children, white Wordsworth here refers to William Wordsworth. And we share one heart. You all know that William Wordsworth is a famous romantic poet. He is in love with nature around. He has written many poems about nature and its beauties and plants and trees around. Right? So this man, Black Wordsworth, shared one heart with white Wordsworth, that is William Wordsworth. Why? Because he too was in love with the nature around. I can watch a small flower like the morning glory. This is name of the flower, the morning glory. And cry. I said, why you does cry? Now here, he says that he is so much in love with nature that here crying wouldn't be out of sorrow. Here crying would be out of admiration, out of happiness he would feel in the company, in the jocund company of the flowers around. Right? So he's in love with nature as William Wordsworth is. Now I hope you have understood these 2 pages of the chapter. Reread them for better understanding. And for homework, you have to read and plan page number 118, 119 and 120. Thank you.